For more on this, let's bring in Remi Piet of Embellie Advisory. Remi, thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. Chile's vote is the culmination of a 4-year undertaking. Talk us through about how we got here.
No, you're absolutely right. This is the latest episode of a 4-year-long constitutional saga in Chile. First, in 2018, you had the election of Gabriel Boric and the Constitutional Assembly that was, put together to try to draft new constitutions, trying to offset some of the, issues with the Pinochet-era constitution that actually favored, more inequalities in the country and lack of access to public services for the poorest part of the population. But unfortunately, the Constitutional Assembly at that time was really much more left-leaning and actually tried to push for, strong, position, especially and such as, having at least 50% of women in any public institution, protection of water and many resources, environmental regulations that were maybe seen too strong for the majority of Chileans, and therefore that first constitutional draft was rejected. The second one, however, was drafted by a new constitutional assembly, which, as far as the first one was leaning strongly to the left, the new one was actually led by the far right, Republican Party, and really went all into a much more conservative decisions, such as, for example, the series of return on decisions on abortion rights, for example, very strong economic terms that would actually not be in favor of again, a large part of the population which is disenfranchised from economic growth in Chile.
Yeah, and it's also got a much more of a pro-market approach to governing as well, ensuring the private sector has a prime role in areas like education and health. Talk to us a little bit about how that might play out for Chileans on a day-to-day level and how it's different to how people live today.
Well, it's quite interesting when you look at Chile. It's one of the most advanced Latin American economies, but at the same time, the level of inequalities is as strong, if not stronger than its neighboring countries. And a large part of the population does not have access to quality education because private universities are so costly. For example, this new constitution would have reinforced even more what was actually inside the Pinochet 1980 constitution. Also, making sure that the state would not have too much of a role into drafting new regulations, and that is probably reinforcing those inequality gaps throughout the country, and what has led to a series of unrest and riots in the streets in 2019. I think what's interesting is you see in Chile an increase again of those two sides of politics that are becoming more and more extreme. And the only thing that the Chileans really agree on is the fact that a constitution should be much more moderate, at least, and therefore they will be rejecting probably that new draft as much as they did in 2020.
It seems that this vote is going to be rejected. Political scientists say this is quite unusual. Before Chile's plebiscite last year, voters had approved 94% of the 179 full constitutional referendums worldwide since 1789. Talk us about that historical element a little bit. And if this fails, do you think that it will come up again, or will it be put to bed? Will that be it?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right when you mention and underline those historical figures. I mean, Chile used to be quite a bit of an exception with different democratic transitions. After the Pinochet era, you had a center-left government with Bachelet. You had some more center-right government with Piñera, for example. It's only fairly recently that you started having a little more polarized sides of politics. Gabriel Boric has been trying to gather very strong leftist and different movement in government, but that also has antagonized and worried a series of more traditional middle-class Chileans that have turned to more of the Republican Party suggestions. But neither of these actually been able to try to find and gather a common road for Chileans that used to be usually very moderate compared to other countries in Latin America. And as a result, it's very likely that and Boric already has announced that if that second constitutional draft was not adopted, he will not pursue a third one, which means that we will go back to the 1980, maybe more stable constitution, which at the same time should be mitigated, as I was mentioning, because of the impact that it has in terms of widening inequalities across the society in Chile.
Remi Piet of Embellie Advisory, thank you very much for your time.